Number one is the loneliest number that you'll ever do.
You know, when we think about lonely, the song about loneliness, we often don't think about young men as, you know, that's not the first go-to for most people when we think about loneliness. But there are a lot of young men right now in the United States who are lonely and unhappy, and in many who don't even see a positive future for themselves or even for our country. And it's a dangerous thing when a society has a large number of angry, unhappy, hopeless young men. When this has happened in other countries, it's led to a lot of unrest and violence. So the reason that I say, you know, we're in the summer series, #unfiltered, right? The reason I call this topic unfiltered this morning is because talking about the problem of men is controversial these days. Because the conversations around who needs help in our society right now are mostly centered on women and people of color, understandably so. Many people would say, men need help? Come on, please. Now, progressives are likely to criticize me for centering men when other voices that have not been heard should be talked about. What makes this subject even more controversial is that there are people, preachers, politicians, and others who say things like, straight white Christian men are the most discriminated against people in society today in America, you know, which is absolutely ridiculous, and that is not my position. Before I tell you what this message is, let me take a moment to tell you what this message is not. This message is not pushing back against the important work of creating equality across all segments of our society. And as I hope you know, I am a big proponent of efforts to ensure equal access and opportunity for women, LGBTQAI+ folks, and others who've been historically marginalized, disadvantaged due to race, class, ethnicity, and many other factors. The thing is that helping men and boys does not take away from helping anyone else. There seems to always be this fear that if I help one group, another group is going to be harmed. But supporting gay marriage did not harm heteronormative marriages, as some people feared. Supporting Black lives doesn't hurt anyone else's lives. Just as saving the whales doesn't harm the seals. Saving the males doesn't mean harming females or any other people of any other gender identity. And there are many gender identities across a long spectrum, as we're learning more and more. Now, as a theological universalist with a background in sociology, I have to say, it's not a zero-sum game when it comes to helping people in society to have what they need to live a productive and meaningful life. We need to get away from the polarizing ideas of us versus them in these conversations, and as we talk about making sure that everyone has what they need to live their best life. So today, I'm talking unfiltered about those who identify as male and men, because there's a crisis happening. And there's a lot of misleading information out there about it. Professor Scott Galloway from New York University explains the data is overwhelming. Males are 3 times as likely to be addicted than females, 4 times as likely to kill themselves as women, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated, and are 70% of those struggling with opioid addiction. He says, we don't have a homelessness problem. We don't have an opioid problem. We don't have an incarceration problem. We have a male problem. A male suicide, homeless, and incarceration problem. Why is such a disproportionate number of people who identify as male in such peril in America today? What is it about our society and culture that is producing these results? And what can we, you and I, do about it? Now, I'm going to name a few solutions that we sometimes hear, and I'd like your help assessing them. You know how when someone gets a wrong answer on a game show, there's like a buzzer, it's like, right? All right, so I want you to be the buzzer as I name these solutions. If you think it's the wrong answer, just say, okay, something like that, all right? Let's give it a try. Answer number 1 about who or what to blame for the crisis of boys in America today. Blame women? All right. Is it homosexuality? All right. Is it because of the growing acceptance of gender diversity? Thank you. Good. Is it liberals? All right. All right, so then what is it? You can stop being the buzzer now, otherwise this is going to be a very long morning for all of us. So one problem that we have is that we forget that the enemy, if you will, that which we need to fight in right now in society is not men, but patriarchy. It's not masculinity. It's not men. It's the system of power that has existed and continues to exist that puts men superior to women and uses their power to disenfranchise or abuse women or keep them down or others. So we need to stop making men the problem or men the enemy and focus our attention on patriarchy, this abusive system of power. Historically, patriarchy involves the abuse of power by men at the expense of women, and too often we conflate men with patriarchy as if they're the problem, and we conflate masculinity with toxicity as if there's something wrong with masculinity itself. So many traditionally understood masculine qualities are things that I think we all can, should, and do celebrate. And there are many women across the gender spectrum who embody traditional masculine qualities, and that's wonderful too. It's not just men who express masculinity. Galloway tells a story about a fire on the 11th floor of a Westin hotel that he was staying in, and as he walked into the lobby, 9 firefighters showed up, each carrying about 80 pounds of gear, axes and oxygen tanks, and 8 of them were men and 1 was a woman. And they came to save people, and they immediately started heading up the stairs to the 11th floor into the fire. There's nothing wrong with these or many other qualities traditionally defined as masculine, qualities of physical strength and protection and bravery. The problem is when people disparage women who express these qualities or deprecate men who do not. Researchers call it the gender straitjacket. Have you ever heard that? When a society enforces gender rules, because our sex is there's a biological piece and physical piece to what is our sex, male, female, man, or woman, but gender is a socially constructed and culturally constructed idea of what somebody with that sex, how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to be. So this gender straitjacket that keeps people in certain roles because of their biology or otherwise physicality is bad for everybody. It's bad for men, it's bad for women, it's bad for people across the gender spectrum. It's ideas that boys wear blue and girls wear pink, and girls show emotion and boys do not, and girls must be polite and nurturing and boys must act tough and aggressive. So one solution to the male crisis is to free boys and men from the gender straitjacket. We've done a better job so far giving women more freedom to be in traditional male roles. than we have of freeing boys to be in what are considered traditionally female roles. So it's not just about accepting boys will be boys, but it's about accepting that boys will be whatever they are called to be in this life. When I titled my message, The Art of Being a Man, I was trying to say that being a man is more art than science, more culture than biology. And anyway, anyone who identifies as male, whether given that identity at birth or not, should be free to do and be whatever they feel called to be without their gender being questioned or disparaged. But today, as these gender norms are changing, on one end of the spectrum, there are some influencers who see how men are struggling with the changes in society and their expectations upon them, and they've come up with some, be a man programs. And they start off, usually pretty well about, getting fit and taking responsibility in your life, but they often will veer into anti-women or anti-immigrant ideas pretty quickly and into other things like that. So nowadays, when someone often starts talking about supporting men, people immediately assume that this person's anti-woman or that this person's pushing back against the changes that are happening in society. And then since helping men and boys and speaking up about it has become controversial and discussed less, this void is too often being filled with folks who are leading boys astray and young men, whether it's gangs or militia groups or religious fundamentalists who are stepping in and promoting forms of masculinity that are domineering and often toxic and sometimes violent. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, there are some women who, when asked to define what is a good man, they describe someone who sounds like another woman. They might say a good man is sensitive, cries openly, talks about his feelings, and listens without trying to fix the problem. When some women describe the perfect man, he sounds just like her girlfriends. And fortunately, there are men like that. I feel like I have a lot of those qualities. My wife Anitra may differ on how much, but I enjoy processing feelings. As a minister, I do a lot of caregiving. I do a lot of literal hand-holding and listening and crying with people. These are often, historically considered more feminine characteristics or qualities. But if a good man is defined by having traditional feminine qualities, well, that's just another straitjacket. What boys and young men need are good role models. And if we look at the big picture, when you combine the lack of fathers in homes raising their children with the very low percentage of male teachers in primary schools, more and more males don't have or boys don't have a male role model in their lives until they're out of high school. So one of the most important things that we can do for boys and young men are to find them positive male role models. And we need a new vision of a modern masculinity. Professor Galloway explains that one view of men today is a distorted view of strength. One of our leading presidential candidates is cruel and crass and a cheater and a criminal and is considered by many to be a strong leader. Elon Musk is seen by many as a man to look up to, but he has 11 children and he doesn't live with any of them. Vladimir Putin is lauded around the world and right here in this country by many for his strength, and yet he's a murderer. These are poor role models for young boys and men of what masculinity and leadership looks like. So as I said earlier, on the other side of the spectrum is the idea that a modern man should be more like a woman, and that too is not the answer, at least not for many males. So where do we find males who are forging a modern masculinity that is not cruel or anti-woman or transphobic or homophobic and isn't based on patriarchy and domination or older versions of the gender straitjacket? One place that we can find them and can be them is right here at All Souls, right here at church, right here in our own community. Yes. You can clap to that. Boys and young men need mentors, and we, men, need to be mentoring and sharing our experience with the younger generations. The call to those who identify as male is to continue to become better and better men. When people stay home on Sundays and they stop being involved in church and community, we leave a gap that other men with other values will fill. So I want to encourage the men here to get involved in teaching Sunday school if you're not already. Be a mentor for our coming of age class, a youth advisor, a camp counselor, a chaperone on one of our choir trips, or become a reading buddy in one of our partner schools. Come to the career day at one of our partner schools and share what you do and how you came to do it. There is a crisis of men and boys in our society, and there is a need for a new vision of a positive masculinity. Now, regarding such a vision, I think it's only fair to acknowledge that males in our society are still often evaluated on their ability to be protectors and providers. These are important qualities, but what does a modern version of being a protector and a provider look like? If someone's going to be a protector, that means that they protect those who are vulnerable and those who are being targeted and harmed. So a protector is not some tough macho guy who protects the patriarchy or reinforces gender norms in the status quo. A protector today would be and should be standing up for the rights of transgender people and women and anyone who is being persecuted or unfairly treated. There are a lot of ways to protect others also that doesn't have to do with physical strength or traditional power. We can protect with our vote, our organizing, our modeling of inclusion and belonging by voicing our support among other men and in other places where we have influence. That's what modern masculinity looks like. As for protecting and as for providing, there were 2 million more women in college in the United States than men this year. 2 million more women than men in college. And each year it's been increasing. And which is a wonderful thing. But increasingly, men in heterosexual relationships may not be the main wage earner anymore. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then how can a man still be a provider? He can support his partner in other ways. Providing, think about it this way. Providing is about giving back more than you're taking. It's about adding value. When we volunteer, we're giving more than we're taking. When we provide meals for those without homes, when we give rides to appointments to people who need it, there are many ways to provide, many ways to give back, to know that we are adding more than we are taking from society and from others. And it feels good and it builds self-esteem. So let's continue to help to create a new vision of a modern masculinity, not in opposition to the formation of new visions of gender and family and parenthood, but let's do it in support of those efforts. Some people like to boil down what it means to be a man to science, but it's more of an art than a science. And the artist Paul Gauguin said, art is either plagiarism or revolution. In other words, art is either copying the past or inventing a brand new creative future. Don't sleep through the revolution of what it means to be a man. Our boys need you, need all of us. Happy Father's Day.